On all of this with Republican Congressman Mike McCaul of Texas. He is chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, and he's a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Sir, thank you so much for being with us, joining us, in fact, from Aspen, where you are away. And I wonder if you think the challenges the White House is facing right now can be solved by something like this, just a change in the communications team. Is this a communications problem the White House is having, or is this something more substantive?
Well, I think the relationship with Spicer has been a strained one. I think this may be an opportunity to have a more disciplined communications office that can stay on message. I think they've had a difficult time staying on message. It's been very distracting. And we have an agenda in the Congress that we've been trying to pursue, whether it be health care reform, tax reform, or in my expertise, national security issues. I think it was important that that Sarah Huckabee mentioned right out of the box the DHS reauthorization bill that passed on the floor just yesterday and then out of my committee, which will authorize the department for the first time since its creation. That's actually a big deal, but it gets overshadowed by the Russia stuff.
But and I do want to talk to you more about that authorization later, but isn't part of the problem of staying on message, or not part of it, perhaps most of it, if not all of it, the fault of the president? So how would this, I mean, when you're talking about that people aren't focusing on the Homeland Security Department's authorization, it's because President Trump is tweeting, not because his press shop is messing up, right?
Well, I think it is a distraction. And I think with a new communications team in place, and perhaps with the help of the vice president, who's a very measured messenger, if you will, this campaign sort of reined in. Now, this investigation with Bob Mueller is going to continue, as it should. I worked with Bob Mueller in the Justice Department, had a lot of respect for him and his integrity. This needs to be a full and thorough investigation, and then we need to move on. But it seems to consume the news, and that's all we seem to talk about. When I'm at this national security forum here in Aspen, we're talking about how we're moving in on ISIS and Raqqa, how we're stopping the threat from a terrorist, you know, how we're dealing with North Korea and Iran sanctions coming out of the White House, in addition to cybersecurity, which we've been very engaged with the administration on cybersecurity, including China and Russia. And finally, Brianna, we will be moving a Russian sanctions package through the House in response to Crimea, but also they're meddling in the United States elections.
So the president doesn't bear any responsibility for the White House getting off message of the agenda that you want to talk about?
Well, I would prefer, you know, communications coming out of the White House, not always by tweets. Of course, my team usually does that for me, but that seems to be his preferred way to message. But I think they've got to get the messaging out in a more disciplined fashion because we in the House want to move forward with this agenda that we believe is the right agenda for America.
Anthony Scaramucci was asked today, his first time there in the briefing room, and he was asked about the president's baseless claim that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally. This is what he said.
Anthony, do you stand by some of the factual claims that have been contested, that have been made by this administration, 3 million illegal votes cast for the president's opponent? Do you endorse all of those statements?
Okay, so it's a little bit of an unfair question because I'm not up to speed on all of that, so I can just candidly tell you that.
Said 3 million people voted illegally.
Okay, so
do you stand by that or not?
So if the president says it, okay, let me do more research on it. My guess is that there's probably some level of truth to that.
Does that concern you, that he's saying that there's some level of truth to that?
Well, I think this has been the debate. Is there any credible evidence of any fraud in the past election? There always is fraud in our elections, but what I'm more concerned about, Brianna, is the fact that...
But to be clear, it's minuscule, right? We're not talking about 3 to 5 million votes that would have swung the popular vote for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, and I don't think a lot of people do. What I am concerned about is the Russians and other foreign adversaries trying to meddle in the next election cycle in 2018.
I'm sorry, because I do want to talk to you about that, but you don't have a sense of really what the problem with voter fraud is or the size of it?
Voter fraud has existed in every election. The question is the magnitude of the scale in the last presidential, and I think that's why the president has called for this commission. I know the vice president's been involved in this, but until we get to the real facts here, it's hard to state with any clarity what the real facts are.
But it seems like many people in your party seem to believe that it is very much on the small, negligible side as compared to something like 3 to 5 million, which clearly would have a tremendous impact on the outcome of an election.
True, and we don't want to have voter fraud in the future. The fact is the president won this election, and I would prefer to move forward with the policies and agenda that he has proposed that we actually agree with. Taking personalities aside, we want to strengthen, which is what we're talking about at this National Security Conference. We want to strengthen our counterterrorism capability. We want to secure our border to stop illegals and potential terrorists from coming in to the country. Those are the issues we want to be talking about as House Republicans, and I think too often we get drowned out by this other static.
According to the Washington Post, President Trump and his legal team have been discussing his pardoning power. If he could pardon aides, family, even himself. Would pardons to you be an admission of some sort of guilt?
Well, I do think that Sarah Huckabee Sanders discounted that today by saying they are not looking at pardoning anyone within the administration. I do think because there is an investigation, I suppose this is a legitimate conversation to have with attorneys, but that certainly would not, in my judgment, have a very good optic to it.
You think why is it reasonable to have that conversation with attorneys? 6 months into an administration.
And it is unfortunate that this early into an administration, we're getting overshadowed by this when there are so many important issues facing this nation that we are trying to address both here at this conference and in the Congress and in the White House that quite honestly don't get reported and get overshadowed.
Would pardons, do you think, be seen as an attempt to obstruct justice and obstruct these investigations into the president and his associates?
Again, I know there's an ongoing investigation. I know campaign officials are being investigated. Certainly this meeting at Trump Tower with this Russian lawyer who had apparently Russian intelligence ties is concerning. That meeting even took place in Trump Tower with some of the major principals in the campaign. And the question is, whether there is this collusion or whether they were just sort of duped into this meeting, as the Russians often like to set up.
I want to ask you something in your capacity as a formal federal prosecutor. When you hear President Trump criticizing his attorney general, the deputy attorney general, the acting FBI director, the special counsel as well, are you concerned about President Trump's respect for the law and for the independence of those men and for the agencies where they work?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Jeff Sessions. I've worked with him in the Congress. I think he was appointed by the president. I think right now, if it were me, I would be showing the utmost respect for the process, allow the process to move forward with Bob Mueller and the special counsel investigation, and have respect for justice and the FBI. I think, having worked in that capacity for over a decade, I do have utmost confidence that they will do their job. The question is there anything there? And we won't know until this investigation is completed.
But you have the confidence that they will.
And there may not be anything.
And you said the respect. But does the president, he doesn't seem to have the confidence or the respect for these men and for their institutions.
Well, I don't think personal attacks on good people is the right way to go here. I think to the contrary, I would be showing great respect for these men, knowing that they're going to do a very professional job